Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the In Pursuit podcast. My name is Dion Garrett, and I'm your host. And this is a podcast for people who, kind of like me, are just really curious and interested on trying to live the fullest life that you can in every aspect of life. And today I am joined with a special guest we've actually never met before. So you're the first guest that I've had that I've never met before. This is our first meeting.
We have a mutual acquaintance.
We do. The guy who produces podcasts for us. But this is Beth, and your last name is pronounced
Wilmes.
Wilmes.
Yep.
This is Beth Wilmes. And Beth, you're here today to share a little bit about, really, I want to hear more about your story. You've had a winding journey, just an unlikely thing, like God doing some stuff in your life that no one wants, and yet he's caused it to work for good. So we're gonna we're gonna dive into that today.
Okay, let's do it.
Because I really do love, I love hearing people's stories. I'm a planner, and we plan for these journeys, and we expect our lives to go a certain way, and then things don't happen the way we expect, and we can be really heartbroken or frustrated by those things.
Yeah.
If with enough time and openness, I think we all start to realize, you know what, it's good that God didn't let things go in the way that I wanted them to go. I was planning on them going. Really, He knows better, and my life is somehow richer and fuller from having all my dreams dashed and
right.
dashed.
I mean, we always joke, I have a nonprofit that we'll probably get to, but we always joke that we're full of type A control freaks. And I do think that when God intervenes and kind of causes you to release that control, there's so much freedom in it. But, for those of us that really like to be in control and have a plan, it really does take you down to the studs.
Yeah. It does. We're doing a men's study here on Thursday mornings here at Pathfinder. And they did this, it was great. They did this section on the deep idols, and the idols are control, significance, and comfort. And especially those are the ones that they say men are especially get mired in. And while some of the guys in my group are talking about the significance thing, and I'm like, I don't want to be insignificant, but that's not a big driver for me.
Yeah.
I don't need a lot of recognition. Comfort, comfort's not a big thing for me, but the control thing, the control week, I was just like,
this is me. I relate to all three of those. I think I had a problem with all three. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I really did.
You say did, past tense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I just grew up and I had a plan. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what level of achievement I wanted to be at by what age. I knew exactly how much money I wanted to make. I knew how many kids I was going to have, where I was going to live. I mean, I was really a planner. And my life has gone in none of those directions, and for the better. Thank God. Literally.
Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about it. So what was it sounds like you had a lot of clarity on what you wanted your life to look like.
Sure.
But give us the broad brushstrokes of what you thought your life was going to be or what it was.
It was just going to be a very comfortable, self-serving, inward-focused life. And I realize that now.
Yeah.
At the time,
at
the time you don't feel selfish.
You're not going to be.
Right. No, at the time you think you're very, open to, putting others and God before yourself, but you're not. And so, I was, kind of on my career path. I was a lifelong salesperson. And I was married to my high school sweetheart, who I'm still married to. And we were living in the burbs, and I was focused on my career. I had 3 kids at the time. My youngest had just turned 1. And then just one day, like many women, I felt a lump and went to the doctor and found out within a couple of days that I had breast cancer at the age of 35. And so
at this time you said you have 3 kids and your youngest is 1?
Yeah. So at the time, my kids were 6, 4, and 1.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And of course, at that age, the last thing that was on my mind was cancer.
Yeah.
I just had no frame of reference for it. I didn't know anybody that had had cancer. It just
and your body's you're making babies, and you're like, your body's working and working well, and you're like, all systems
so
go.
I thought,
and,
right.
Yeah. So
I thought, looking back now, I think that, I wasn't doing myself any favors because I was in that constant drive of go, go, go. And so I can look back and say, ooh, maybe you weren't as healthy as you thought you were. You weren't taking care of yourself mentally. You weren't taking care of yourself spiritually, physically, clearly not. I will say that I had come to faith about 8 years prior to my diagnosis.
Okay.
And so I had been working on my relationship with the Lord leading up to that moment. And I'm very grateful for that because then, I had faith to cling to when I got that news. And immediately that was a hit the floor moment. And I think that was really when I realized how little control I actually had. As a self-proclaimed control freak, that was really, really hard for me.
So you talk about a hit the floor moment. What did the conversation with God sound like at that moment? You find out your young mom with cancer.
Strangely enough, there wasn't any anger.
Okay.
There wasn't any, just profound sadness. I felt responsible for derailing my family's life. I felt guilty, like I somehow did this by not taking care of myself. And now, the life we had planned for ourselves was going to be different. Did I have a future? I didn't know. So with God, very early on, and I still think back on this, I never prayed, please save my life. Please let me live, which is a lot of people's prayer. I just want to live. I want to raise my kids. For me, the not knowing whether I was going to live or die was the hardest part. So I think there was some level of trust already there with God. Like, I know that I can't handle this on my own. I know that your plan's better than mine. I know I can trust you. I think that was kind of there. But the will I or won't I, that uncertainty that most survivors live with, was the part that was just really devastating for me, living in that unknown space. And so I remember just grappling with that. I just want to know. I just want to know if I'm going to live or die. And then one day I remember thinking to myself, well, what if he doesn't answer? What if you never find out? What if you're meant to live in that uncertainty? This is kind of where the rubber hits the road. Do you or do you not trust him, regardless of whether he gives you that answer? And so I had to really sit in that. And I did have that moment where I said, okay, Lord, I lay it down at your feet. My life is yours to do with it what you think is best. I surrender. And I think that was the moment where I finally fully surrendered to his plan for me. Ironically, the minute that I did that, well, not the minute, 2 days later, I was sitting with my kids on my couch and my husband was across the way and we were watching that movie Jumanji.
Yeah.
The Robin
original
Williams,
one?
The original.
Okay.
The origin's the good one. I'm sorry. No offense to The Rock.
It's also spooky.
Yes, it is. It's super.
It is a little weird, but
it's spooky.
Yeah. But my oldest daughter has a story of being with her cousins, and they were going to watch Jumanji, and she knows she's afraid of things. She's 22 now, but she's still afraid of things. But at the time, she's a kid and she's afraid of it, and kind of nervous about the show. And her cousin goes, "Nah, don't worry. It's just like Candyland." And she's like, "Oh." And she was talking years later about, she's like, that was not like Candyland.
Nope, not Candyland at all. And my youngest, the baby was asleep. So the other ones were 6 and 4. So that was kind of young to introduce them to Jumanji. Yeah. I don't know. I guess my husband and I were not worried about the nightmare situation. Yeah. But it is.
And did they have nightmares?
No, they didn't.
Yeah, see,
so I guess we were okay. But we're sitting there watching that movie. And I've got a kid on each side and I've got my arms around them and I'm trying to stay present in the moment because the minute that you find out you have cancer, there's a lot of uncertainty at the beginning. You're waiting around to get more information. At that time, I didn't know how advanced it was, what treatments I was going to have. And so your mind is just constantly ruminating on these things. And so you're trying to be present with your family. And at the same time, it's just almost impossible. But I remember holding on to them and watching this movie and being like, just focus on the movie. Enjoy this time with your family. And all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, I just get hit with this feeling of peace. I mean, it literally washed over me from head to toe like a warm bath. And in that moment, I felt God speak to me. And it wasn't like an audible voice, but it was like he was talking directly to my soul. It was like a different form of communication, but I heard it very clearly. And he said, you are not going to die from this, but you will suffer. And in that instant, I knew what he said was true, even though I knew that there was no logical way to know it. I just knew that I wasn't going to die from breast cancer. And so that was kind of the first of several miracles that happened over the course of my treatment. But I thought it was so interesting that the minute that I released the uncertainty to him and said, okay, I am going to trust you with this. I don't need to know anymore. He gifted me with the knowledge that this wasn't going to be my story, the end of my story.
It's also interesting, that was I imagine that hearing that you're not going to die was a source of peace, but hearing that you're going to suffer is not exactly a peace-filled message.
No.
It's not like, I'm going to take this all away and you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And so as you both experienced, as the scriptures say, a peace that surpasses all understanding, and
100%.
As you experiencing that in your body and you're hearing this message, was everything, did there feel like there was dissonance in that of like, oh, I'm going to suffer, or it just felt like the suffering is going to be okay because you're going to live? Like,
this is where it's weird. This is where I'm really kind of in awe of God, because at the time that I heard him speak to me at that moment, the only thing in that moment that I heard was, you're not going to die from this. The "you will suffer" came later. Like, it almost was like he imparted that later when I was more emotionally stable to handle it.
Yeah.
Which I just think speaks to how personal our relationship is with him. You know, he knew what state I was in at that moment. He knew how fragile I was. He knew that I wouldn't have been able to handle the "you're going to suffer" piece then and there. So he gave me the peace of and the assurance of knowing that I'm not going to die from this. And that knowledge that I was, that he told me I was going to suffer almost came later. And so it's really it blows my mind, honestly, the way that it happened. It just absolutely blew my mind. But looking back at it, I could see him putting the pieces in place for the work that I do now, and why that might have, why that would have been necessary. And so, yeah, I mean, he's just such a great orchestrator. I couldn't have imagined it.
Yeah, and I can imagine for some people listening today who maybe haven't had that experience, and that's probably a lot of people who haven't had the experience of really feeling like God is speaking something to you.
Yeah, my husband's so frustrated. He's like, what the heck? He's like, why are you getting messages and I got nothing? So I understand when people are just like, trust me.
And was that like the first time that you had experienced that? You said you were newer to your faith, but that was like the first time that you really were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, of course I had always felt, I felt close to God.
Yeah.
I felt the Holy Spirit prompting me in certain ways that I attributed to him. But I consider that a miracle, full-fledged speaking to me in a direct. And what's interesting too, it was such an authoritative voice, but it was so loving, but it was so authoritative. It was almost like, he spoke to me in a way that he knew I would appreciate, which I'm a direct person.
Yeah.
I don't like mixed messages.
I can imagine that right now.
Yeah.
Just from,
I don't like mixed messages. I don't like, a lot of gray. I'm very black and white. And it was just like he spoke to me the way that I needed to hear it. But yeah, trust me, I completely understand for those listening who haven't had that experience. I mean, I'm just absolutely in awe that it happened, and there are family members that are like, I want that. And of course.
And there's this whole thing, which we won't go down this road, but about, like, how do you, and people ask the question, how do I hear from God? And I think sometimes in life, there are the moments of, sit with the word, get quiet, be still, pay attention to kind of how the Spirit might be prompting you. But then there are moments where you're not trying to hear from God. God just speaks.
Right.
So like there's a position that you can be in, or a disposition you can have to try to, all right, Lord, what is it? Direct my life. How, and you're trying to listen, and that's a good spiritual practice to get into. But then there are moments where, just like you said, you're watching Jumanji with your kids, and suddenly God is like, boom, there's a word for you.
Yeah, and I think people like to think too that I must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But we're not on, that's not the case at all. It's just God speaks when God speaks, and it's like what he thinks you need or what's in your best interest. It's not about, I have had many conversations with him since then, like, hey, it's been a while since I've had that miracle. I wouldn't mind another one, and I may never see that again, and that's okay, But yeah, I always think people think, oh, I must be doing it wrong. It's like, that's not really how it works. Or, he's the boss.
So that day you were given, this gift of peace, this word from God, this reassurance from God. But then but then I'm into treatment. So yeah, I was stage 2. So I had to do all the things, the double mastectomy, chemo, radiation, drug therapy, had a lot of side effects from the treatments that give me lifelong health problems to this day. So by no means was it an easy road. Doing all this while trying to raise small kids and, keep the marriage intact, which I'm very fortunate that my husband and I have a wonderful marriage, but it's just not easy. Yeah.
And so, just, yes, I had that peace and that understanding, which was just amazing. And yet, you're still called to suffer. You still have to go through all the things. And I had so many conversations during the treatment process of, well, why do I have to do this? You said I'm not going to die from this. I don't want to do chemotherapy. I don't want to radiate over my heart.
Right.
I don't want to get, potentially all these side effects, which I did in fact end up getting. And he very clearly in those moments was like, you need to do this. And so that was more of like that spiritual Holy Spirit prompting. It wasn't a direct voice. I didn't get gifted that again, but it was just kind of this deep knowing of, you need to listen to me and you need to go through this. And so in some ways it felt like he walked me right into the fire, which we're always wanting God to kind of take us away from discomfort. Going back to your 3 things that you're always seeking is significance, comfort, and what was the other? Control.
Control, yeah.
And it's like, yeah. And he literally walked me right into all the things that I feared the most. And I think that can be really difficult for people too, is just, our desire for comfort and then God's desire for us to be uncomfortable are often at odds with each other.
Yeah, a recent guest that we had on, we're just talking about the endless avoidance in life, and especially in Western life, of like anything that makes us uncomfortable.
Yes.
And it's just, and I get it, but there's no growth. There's no growth, and there's in us or no change in the world without
nothing,
discomfort.
no growth happens when you're comfortable.
No.
None. And so I agree with you. And I think as a culture, we have been conditioned to seek comfort at all costs, to the point where even when I'm at my son's cross country meets, I'm looking for a chair and I'm like, it's 20 minutes long. Why can't you just stand and watch this race? I mean,
be glad you're not, running with all the rest of them. You get to stand here. They're
but
running.
That was the first thing I thought about when I was like searching out a chair. I'm like, it's 20 minutes. Have you gotten so soft that you can't stand for 20 minutes? We're just so conditioned to always be comfortable. And you're right. Nothing good happens in the comfort. So,
yeah. And with that conditioning to be comfortable, either a sense that God has failed us or we've done something wrong in those moments where we've not been comfortable. So I'm curious, you go through cancer treatment. I don't know how long your
maybe it was like a year.
Was.
And
Did you try to stay working? Did you know you had to?
So that was the thing. I had always been a driver. I was always I always wanted to work really hard and make a lot of money and just go, go, go. And I think when I got cancer, I just realized that I was just spent. And I kind of gave myself permission. I was fortunate enough. I took leave and I took off about 6 to 8 months worth of work. And it was the first time in my life that I hadn't worked. And, I couldn't be obsessively looking at my emails or being on my computer or, it was for the first time in my life, it felt like I had to be still and just be present in the moment. And I tell people all the time that going through cancer treatment was one of the most relaxing times in my life. I was still scared. I was still anxious, but I was so present. And I was also so close to God at that time, that I miss it. And so I had taken time off of work and then went back toward the end. But when I really fully expected after I went through treatment that I was going to return to the same life that I was leading prior to everything. It was breast cancer is not who I am. It's just something I went through. I wasn't the kind of person that was going to be wearing the pink or doing the walks or, just promoting it. I kind of was more ashamed about it. Like, I'm going to shrink back and just, I don't want anybody to know that doesn't have to. And so I had every intention of going back into my career, and I did. I went back to work, but I very quickly realized that everything had changed from that experience. All my values were different. I didn't care about the promotions anymore. I didn't care about the status, feeling significant, by somebody else's standard. I didn't care about working the hours and traveling and being away from my kids all the time. So it was very confusing. And it is that way for a lot of cancer survivors. They get done with this really traumatic event and everybody kind of picks up the pieces and moves on. And then you're left there holding like all the chaos. And it's just very, very confusing. And so, I went to go be the person I was, and I was like, wow, that person doesn't exist anymore. Now what do I do?
Yeah, I was going to ask, so you talked about your values were different, and suddenly you didn't care about things that you used to care about. At that time, did you also sense what you did care about, or was that a journey of discovery? Was it like, oh, those things, you know what I mean? Like those things don't matter to me anymore, but what matters to me, I don't know, I need to figure that out. Or was it already clear? Those things don't matter to me anymore. This is what does.
So I was feeling disgruntled about work. And so I went to a therapist, and I said, hey, and I'm a big proponent of mental health, and we tell people all the time in the nonprofit, like, take the shortcut, right? There are professionals out there that can help you get to where you want to go faster. So I'm a big proponent of it. And so I found a therapist, and I went into her, and I was like, hey, I'm here for a tune-up. I just want to talk about why I'm not happy at work. I figured I'd be there for a couple of sessions and in and out. And she goes, well, I notice here that you're, a cancer survivor. And I said, yeah, but I'm not here about that. I'm here about my work. I want to talk about that. And she's like, well, let's talk about it all. And what I thought was going to be 1 or 2 sessions ended up being about 2 years worth of work with her. But while we were working together, she was really instrumental in showing me, how my values had changed, why, I was on this rabbit wheel of quote unquote success.
Yeah.
And she was really instrumental in showing me that even though I said I wanted something different, I kept making the choice to do the same. And it's really interesting how sometimes it takes somebody on the outside point that out to you.
Yeah, it's such a human thing, but you're right. It happens all the time.
Yeah, we all get on that wheel, and we don't know anything different. We've conditioned ourselves to the point where it's like we don't know how to get off. And at one point when I was talking to her about not really enjoying my job anymore, I came in for a session one day, and she's like, what's new? And I said, oh, I'm interviewing for a new job. And she's like, oh, that's great. Tell me about it. And I'm like, well, it's great. It's going to give me this much money, and, it's going to be this job title, and it's just going to be so great for significance and financial comfort. But then she kept drawing more and more out of me. And I'm like, well, I have to go live in a hotel in another state for 3 months to train, and then I'll be traveling 75%. And so she's like, so she stopped me, and she goes, you do you. But I want to make a point that you are doing the exact same thing that you have done in every other job. And you're telling me you want something different, but your actions are showing me that you don't.
Yeah.
And she goes, you don't have to take this job. And I said, well, I feel like I do. I'm half of our salary, and, I've got kids in private school, and, all the reasons start coming up of why I have to do this, why I have to go back into the grind and do this. And she was just really instrumental in being like, but you don't. You can make a different choice. And I remember I called up the recruiter, and I'm sitting there thinking in my head, these recruiters, they get paid when you place.
Yeah. Right.
That's how they get paid.
Yeah.
And we were kind of toward the tail end of this interview process, and I felt fairly confident that it was going to result in an offer. And I remember calling her up, and I just said, look, I'm really sorry. I've taken it down this road. I should have never taken it down. I've wasted your time. I apologize, but I'm going to respectfully back out of this. I said, I'm a cancer survivor. I just realized that my values are totally different, and this isn't in alignment with them anymore. I'm so, so sorry I wasted your time. And I really expected this woman to just get really mad at me.
Yeah.
And there was this really long pause, and she goes, I have to tell you, I really respect what you're doing. She said, don't worry about me. Don't worry about the process. I'll take care of it. She's like, you do what's in your best interest for yourself and your family. And she's like, kudos to you for getting off the wheel, so to speak. So but when I got off the phone with her, it was like the chains had been broken. It was like just by making that one decision to get off and do something else. I didn't know what that was going to be.
Yeah.
But it was like that hold over me of status and money, and that grind was just gone. Now I had to go home, and I told my husband that I did this. Yeah, and then on top of it, I told him, I also just don't think I need to go back to work right now. I need a minute to just not work at all and just think about what I'm supposed to be doing. And he was just really shocked and worried, because he was used to a wife that was just go, 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 and very driven. And now all of a sudden I just wanted to put the brakes on that and really upend our lives, because like I said, I was half of our salary.
Yeah, he had built a life around.
Right. 2 incomes. Now I'm talking about us going down to 1. He goes, well, we really can't do it. He goes, we can't. And I said, not true. We can, but our lives are going to look drastically different. We're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices. But I'm telling you, if I don't do this, it's not going to be good for me mentally, spiritually, physically, for our marriage. And so for 2 days, he kind of walked around in a nervous, state about, because he knows once I make up my mind, it's really, I wasn't going to do it without his, blessing, but he knew I was pretty determined. And after 2 days, he came to me and he says, you know what, we're going to trust God with this. I trust you. I know you know what you need. Like, we'll figure it out. And so
Yeah.
And,
I'm just imagining, and I haven't been through this journey personally, but as a spouse, if it's true for you that you're going through cancer treatment and you're like, I just can't wait till I get my life back and I get to resume the life that I have. I imagine that would be even as true truer for the spouse.
Sure. Yeah.
And without experiencing, I mean, they've gone through the traumatic event of all the treatment without experiencing the inner transformation. That's got to be like,
I'm sure it was
like really
super
shocking.
Yeah.
Or just, you're like, no, you're through the thing. You're here. You're alive. Let's get our lives back to where they were.
Yeah. And he definitely felt that way. He definitely, it was a little bit of, I want my old wife back, right?
Yeah.
That's who he married. That's who he knew. And now I was coming to him as a completely different person, and a lot of people will say that about cancer. I remember when I went back to work, I was in a customer's office before I quit for good. And I was in a customer's office and this guy popped his head in and they're like, oh, this is Beth. And they made the introduction. And he goes, Beth just got back from cancer treatment. And he goes, the man that was in the doorway, he goes, did it change you? That was his first thing to say to me. And I thought, whoa, like, how does he know? And I said, it changed. Yeah. I go, it changed me on every level. And he was very quiet, but he said, my wife had cancer. And he goes, and she's always been different since. He goes, not bad, but just different. And so I think for my husband, it was shocking and hard because here's this person in front of him that he didn't recognize anymore. And it's very disconcerting. And so it really took an act of trust on his part, both in me and in God, to sit there and say, okay, I haven't heard any messages. All I know is my life is not as comfortable as it once was, but sure, let's do this together.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying.
I think it was.
To either be like, I could lose my wife, or, for anyone who's kind of in this moment of diagnosis right now or is imagining this in their future, like I can lose my spouse, but if I don't lose them, the best case is I get to keep them, but they're going to be they could be totally different.
Yeah.
And they probably will be different in some way.
Yeah.
That's got to be really, really scary.
It was scary for him. It was really scary for him, especially because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So the plan was to do nothing, which for both of us has just never been an option.
Yeah.
To just sit in it and not do anything. And so that's what I did. I took a pause and just really I was still. I just didn't have an agenda for the first time ever.
And that was hard for you, or that was easy at this moment?
It felt like relief. It felt like that's what I was meant to do, but it's, and so I felt relief in it. And then I don't know the timeline on it, but I started to feel God kind of start poking at me at a certain point. And I could feel him saying, you could be doing something with this. Like, don't waste this opportunity. And I kept saying, be quiet. I don't want to do this. It's just like, shh, and,
right.
and sometimes
I'm just shifting gears here.
Right.
Yeah.
I just got comfortable. Can you please just give me a minute? But that feeling kept building and building. And so I was sitting there going, oh, what am I supposed to do with this? I mean, breast cancer is so common. It's 1 in 8 women in their lifetime. There's so many causes around it. Yeah. I kind of had breast cancer fatigue before I even had it. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It had been so commercialized. And I thought, do we really need anything else out there? I wasn't interested in recreating the wheel.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, okay, if you were going to do something, because that feeling that God was telling me to use my skill set to do something with this, it wasn't going away. Mm-hmm. So then I started thinking, okay, well, if you are going to do something, what is it going to look like? And I thought, the one thing that really just shocked me when I went through everything was just cancer is just as much an emotional battle as it is a physical battle. And yet nobody talks about the mental health aspect of being diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. And it's really not an integrative part of cancer care.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's like in a perfect world, when somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, your doctor's going to say, okay, you have this disease and we're going to treat that medically, but now you've also encountered an emotional trauma. Mm-hmm. And that requires supports and resources outside of traditional medical care. Here's your plan for that. But that doesn't.
And that's not the way it works.
No.
Okay.
And there's lots of good reasons why it doesn't. There's not, there's not enough therapists in the world for how many cancer patients there are. It's a capacity issue. It's a stigma issue. People don't like thinking they need mental health help. There's a cost issue is tied to getting mental health help. And so I thought, well, that's just unacceptable. People really need to be helped emotionally through this process. So what if you created an organization that redefines what mental health looks and feels like, and its resources and supports that integrate seamlessly into women's lives, that's low maintenance, unobtrusive, trauma-informed, but really accessible, so that everybody can have the emotional support that they need as they navigate this journey. And that was kind of the catalyst for Faith Through Fire, which is my nonprofit for breast cancer patients. And so I took that to my husband and I said, okay, I know what I want to do. And I knew just enough about nonprofits to know that they're horrible. It's really hard work.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard work to have a nonprofit. And I probably wouldn't have done it if there was anything like it out there, but there's just nobody paying attention to this aspect of cancer care. And so I went to my husband and I said, okay, I think I'm going to start a nonprofit. I'm going to build this thing from the ground up. And he was just, like, okay, do you know how to do that? And I said, well, I don't, but I will. And
I watched a YouTube video on him.
Right. I'm like, but I could feel God in that, so it wasn't me doing it. It was God doing it and me just answering his call. And I think anytime you feel God prompting you to do something, he equips you, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the thing. I had to tell my husband, okay, technically, do I know the ins and outs of starting a new business, let alone a nonprofit? No, but I really feel like God's telling me to do this. And if God's in it, he's going to help me. He's the CEO. I'm the person executing on his behalf.
Yeah, and the way God equips, in my experience, and just as I've seen in other people's lives, it's not you get to go to university for 4 years and then you graduate and then you do your thing. It is... He's equipping you on the way. Yeah. So you take a step and you say, I think I'm supposed to do this. Do you know how? Not really, but I'm taking a step. And then you have a conversation. Yeah, just step by step by step.
Exactly.
On the way.
And
that's different. That's different in life.
It's different. And you also tend to think that you're not doing it right because you see on social or, in the media, oh, this company was started and within 6 months, their revenue was $1 billion. And, you're just sitting there going, what am I doing wrong? But you're right. The way that God does it when he's leading something is just brick by brick.
Yeah.
And you just do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But it just becomes really obvious when he's in charge. It just works out. Mm-hmm. And that's really been my experience with Faith Through Fire. There's been so many miracles in the way that this company has been built, and it's all because it was God-led and, God directed. That's what I have been doing ever since. So it's been 9 years since I got diagnosed with breast cancer, and I've been slowly building this company ever since to help women with the emotional journey of breast cancer. And it's just, the interesting part is that I always felt somewhat unfulfilled at work. I always felt like my creativity I wasn't able to use it the way I wanted. I'd always go to my bosses and say, I have this great idea. And they'd say, that doesn't fit into the corporate structure, right? I was so limited by, you couldn't innovate. When you work for a big corporate company, you can't innovate, you can't pivot. Mm-hmm. You can't say, this isn't working, let's go this direction. And it was infuriating to me. Yeah. I just was never happy at work because I couldn't do those things. And when God really placed Faith Through Fire on my heart, I didn't know it at the time, but he was making a way for me to have the career that I always wanted, where I had that flexibility, I had that creativity, I had the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, all coming together in one company that I feel privileged and honored to lead. And again, he gifted me with my dream job that I didn't even know I wanted, nor did I know I could do. And now it's everything that I could have asked for, but I didn't even know to ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That answers a question that I was just formulating in my mind, because you're this driven person, you have cancer, life slows down, you learn to be still, you start a nonprofit. It sounds like, okay, you're doing the same thing, just in a different space. But what you just described, I guess, is, because my question was going to be how it doesn't sound like maybe you're different. You're still driving, you're still leading, you're still charging ahead. Nonprofit works really hard, especially when you're building one from the ground up. Well, the other things that you just described sound different. What else is different?
It's different, but it's the same. I mean, there are moments where I think to myself, God, I don't want my family to come at the sacrifice of this nonprofit, right? I want to do your work. I want to help women that are in distress. but I also want to be present for my family. I tend to hyper focus. I tend to get so wrapped up in work that they tend to get the leftovers sometimes. That's still something I struggle with. That hasn't gone away. So I have to take that to him often and say, okay, do I need to pull back? I have been very intentional with how slow we've grown the organization because my kids are at a very pivotal age. I want to be around for them. So it's not all about growth and making sure that we scale and that we're making a certain amount of revenue every year, because that doesn't serve my family. So I have had to make intentional decisions to pull back or to slow down so that I can be more present. But that's an ongoing conversation with God, is that, okay, I'm different, but I'm not different.
Yeah.
How do you rein this in? And can I do this work for you and not have it come at a cost to my family? Because that's really important to me. And I think it's just about keeping those lines of communication open. And if he knows where your heart is and what the purity of what you're trying to accomplish, then I think he'll kind of meet you there. But he'll take you down a different path if he thinks you need to go down a different path. I think it's really about staying humble and just always listening for what does he want you to do. Yeah.
So you reference values, like being different on a values level. Is that what? How would you articulate that?
I think this just goes for everybody in life in general, but in particular with cancer patients. When something really hard happens to you in life, it's like you can do one of two things. You can become very inward focused. This is what happened to me. This is why my life is not the same. I'm sad. I'm upset. And it can kind of eat away at you. And that's what I think inward focus does. Or you can take what happened to you and you can use it to help other people suffer less. And that outward focus is really what's so healing, not only for them, but for yourself. So, for example, one of the things that we do in our program for Faith Through Fire is we have a peer mentorship program. So when a doctor or an oncology nurse refers a newly diagnosed patient to us, we'll match them with a survivor who's got the same kind of breast cancer and same treatment plan as that person. And they will walk them through they'll be there as kind of a resource to them. It's all through text messaging to be low maintenance and unobtrusive. But what the mentors, the volunteer survivors are really astounded to find is that it's just, even if they're like 10 years out from when they went through treatment, it's so healing for them to mentor these newly diagnosed patients through this process. And it's because of that outward focus.
Yeah.
It's using your pain to help somebody alleviate somebody else's. And so, I just think that there's the values of using pain for good is something that came out of cancer, just wanting to make the world a better place, a kinder place, a softer place to land. That all came out of personal experience of having to navigate that by myself and just feeling really lost and alone. And so, I think my values now are, how do you make your mark on this world to where you leave it a little bit better? How do you point people to Jesus by being compassionate and loving and that's kind of what drives us now, which is completely different than how I was before.
Yeah, I want to push on the outward focus thing. You said something earlier that I think is helpful, that often when a tragedy happens in our life, something with our health, the loss of someone, there's like this, I need to make meaning of this thing that's happened to me. I would talk about the Oprah Winfrey. There was a little while where, if some random accident happened to a child in a shopping cart, then that person's on the Oprah show, and now there's a crusade to make sure that shopping carts are forever different so that this will never happen again.
Right.
And I understand people do that because they want to prevent another tragedy, sure, but I think people also do that because they're trying to give some sort of redemption or some sort of meaning to this thing that they've suffered.
Yeah.
And I think that's really normal and human. I think sometimes maybe there's a grandiosity that people feel like they have to have to that. So I think in your case, maybe you're uniquely gifted to start a nonprofit. I would hate for everybody to think, and this is definitely not what you're saying, but I think this is sometimes the cultural message that if you go through breast cancer, you have to do something big.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we have, and then you end up having all these competing nonprofits, or you people feel like there's got to be something huge.
Yeah, there's so much, and it's so much redundancy, and it's like, they want to make purpose, so they do this thing. That's where I say it has to be God led.
Yeah.
You have to really, I mean, I did not want to start a nonprofit. That was not on my heart. I wanted to have meaning and purpose from what I went through. But, for me, I was thinking, well, I can show my kids what it looks like to be faithful during a storm. That's where that was really important to me. When I got diagnosed, I thought, if there's one thing that's going to come out of this, it's going to show my children that things are going to happen in life. And you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. And I'm going to show them how to be faithful when things don't go according to plan. That was how I envisioned me using purpose in the situation. The nonprofit was completely God's decision. And I think, I wouldn't have done it had it not been him that said you should be doing something with this. And I don't think people need to do some big gesture like that. I think they completely overestimate or underestimate the power of just those small
like being this peer support role. Like, what a powerful thing to be a friend to somebody who's actually been there.
Right.
People have friends when they go through a cancer diagnosis, but they don't have people who are going through that diagnosis that way. So to have what a
there's
meaningful
so many
thing to
different
do.
ways you can have meaning. I think, it's funny. My mom actually has said that to me. She's like, sometimes I just feel like, I should have been doing something bigger, for God. And I'm like, that's always our, she just told me about she's reading a book and I can't think of the name of it to save my life, but he went over to some country and, got this entire tribe of people who didn't know Jesus. And, she's telling me about this book and she's just like, I just feel so inadequate. And I'm like, Mom, that is, so you're 100% right. I said, well, think of it this way. I said, what if your one purpose on this earth, you and Dad came to faith in your 40s? And then you harassed me and my sister for years until we came to faith. And now Faith Through Fire exists because I know the Lord, which came from you and Dad, showing him to me. So I said, is that not good enough?
Yeah.
Is that not, I think that's pretty remarkable. So people want to minimize what God's doing in their life or how they're showing up in the world. But I think it can be those small moments that really make these enormous ripples and they're not even aware of them.
And I love the way you talk about it, that it becomes a value shift for you. So the important shift is not what's the end result of this contribution, what difference did I make in the world? The important shift is the orientation of my own life thinking, that I move from being centered, thinking a lot about me, to how do I really, and a disease, a diagnosis, a tragedy can make you really inward. And for a little while, maybe you have to be. It's survival.
Sure.
But you don't want to stay there. And so that switch, I think, is the most powerful thing, is that it's that inner change, the disposition change of going, I'm gonna be outwardly focused with this thing. And then God can use you however he wants.
Right. Yeah. We have this program as part of Faith Through Fire. We call it our survivorship boot camps. But we're telling these women that, cancer is a traumatic event. And if you don't close that trauma loop, then people get stuck and they stop participating in life. And that's when they get that real inward focus, but they just stop seeing joy and experiencing life the way that God intended them to. And so the whole purpose of the boot camp is a program where we take them from that place of, it's not particularly helpful. I think psychology has kind of shown this. It's evolved and it says it's not really helpful to look back at, what happened and how unfair it is and how miserable you are currently. Like, that doesn't really do anything for you.
Right.
It's what is my current state, and how do I get to the other side of this to where I can find purpose, meaning, look outward, experience joy again. And so that's kind of what we do for them, is we get them from, being stuck to being able to move forward, with purpose. And
acknowledging this thing happened. It's, we have to acknowledge it, face it, which I think you have, and then, and now what?
Yeah, exactly. And we focus on we'll focus on fun concepts like neuroplasticity, right? Because like a lot of survivors are told, well, you just have to embrace your new normal. And survivors are like, I don't want to embrace my new normal.
What is that, like chemo brain new normal? Or what do you mean new normal?
Yeah, if they have side effects from treatment, if they have chemo brain, if they're unhappy with their bodies after they go through treatment, all these things. And it's just, well, you just have to embrace your new normal. And they're just sitting there going, I hate the new normal. You're telling me I have to embrace this. This is my life now. And so, in the boot camp, we're sitting there saying, no, at one point, scientists thought that, you were more or less wired once you became a certain age. I forget what the age was as a child.
Yeah.
But they used to say once you're set in stone, there was no growth that could happen at that point. You were done. And now they know that's not true, that your brain can form new pathways, new neural pathways at any point in your life. And so we're always telling them, the trauma has created this rut, this kind of dark rut in your brain. And what we're going to do is we're going to work the muscle and we're going to take you this way. But you can get there. You don't have to embrace your new normal. You can get, and that kind of goes back to the spiritual thing. It's like, your spirituality is a walk. You're never there.
Right.
And that's a part of the boot camp too. We talk about the importance of spiritual care and walking with God and lament. And all of the things that come with that, because all of that helps you carve out that new path. And so really, cancer or any difficult thing in life can be your catalyst for your greatest moments. But it's about rewiring your brain to think that way after something really traumatic has happened.
I definitely want to talk more about what you just said, that cancer can be a catalyst for your greatest moments.
Yeah.
I think that probably needs some discussion. I am curious before we do that though, what else does your organization do? You've mentioned the boot camp, you mentioned
mentorship.
The mentorship.
Yeah, so we're really rooted in resources and supports that, like I said, integrate seamlessly into women's lives. So we're really big on educating them on medical trauma. Here's why you have gaps in your memory from treatment. Here's why you're feeling this way. That this is the importance of mental health care and all these things. So we educate them on medical trauma through different resources and books. We have a podcast called Besties with Breasties, which is myself and another young survivor, which is very popular with the people that listen, just because it's not depressing. It's very lighthearted, but it brings information to them that they might not otherwise know, and it's very empowering. But we'll walk them through the treatment process and then through survivorship as well. We have other supports, like when somebody enters into our mentorship program, if they have kids under the age of 10, then their kids get, hugs, Build-A-Bears in the mail as a tangible source of emotional support. The moms will often give it to the kids when they tell them about their diagnosis or when they're going to have surgery and they can't lift them for a long time. We have a house.
I love that.
Yeah, we have a house called our House of Hope out at Innsbruck Resort. Which is like the Wright City, Missouri area. It's beautiful. It's in the trees, but it's a full resort, and we have a home there, and we will send patients who need a break from the rigors of treatment, and we prioritize the incurable, veterans, and then those in our mentorship program.
Okay.
And go out there, and we call it our tree house because it's kind of built out into the trees, and they can go swimming at the lake or golf or play pickleball or, tennis or go to the pool. It's got everything there. There's a Starbucks on site, so they're good.
I know there's a Starbucks.
There's a Starbucks out there, so it's good. And so all of these things on their own are not particularly new or different. Books on trauma are not new. Podcasts aren't new. Vacation homes aren't new. Mentorship isn't new. Bears aren't new. But what we did was we packaged it all together as this comprehensive offering so that when women come into our programming, we're kind of walking with them each step of the way. Because there's basically 3 different steps to processing a cancer diagnosis. It's kind of the acute stage, which is when you're in that fight or flight, you just found out, you're barely holding on. There's the processing phase where maybe you're done with active or primary treatment and you're trying to make sense of everything that happened and it's very confusing. And then there's the resolution phase where you've kind of integrated your trauma, you've made sense of it, and now you're ready to help other people maybe by mentoring. And so everything that we do is very intentional to that process. And the women don't even know that that's what's happening, but we're walking alongside of them with these resources at these various steps when it makes sense for them, in the idea that we are going to get them from that place of trauma to that place of resolution.
And I would imagine sometimes it can be a really long timeline.
It can. There's no time limit on grief.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times women will beat themselves up if they don't just rebound right away. But, I'm 9 years out and there's still aspects of treatment and things that I still struggle with. So, it's a journey and you're just, I don't know that you're ever fully there. It's how I imagine people who lose somebody they love feels. It's like that grief is always there. You just learn to live with it. And so I think that's kind of how we try to equip women, with the right expectations.
Which is a beautiful, I'm trying to hold these ideas into tension. What you said earlier about cancer being this catalyst and right before we, I think, started recording, you said something like your cancer diagnosis.
Oh, it's the best thing that happened to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that way.
So you say that, and at the same time, you're also saying, but this grief thing is real.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, especially for those living with cancer, when their cancer comes back and is now incurable, it's a different story for them, right? They're never going to say they're grateful for cancer. For them, now they have to figure out, can joy and grief coexist? And how do I make that happen? How do I not let this thing, just this anvil that feels like it's always over my head and it could drop at any moment? How do I not let that steal, the joy in my life? And so, cancer can be the best gift, but not everybody's going to feel that way depending on their circumstances, and that's okay. And so there is some tension there, right?
And so how do you reconcile that tension in your own life? That I'm 9 years later, you said there's still grief, and that makes sense. I feel like there should be grief. There's a ton of loss, and at the same time, you've seen how God has reoriented your life and your family and your vocation, your purpose, and presumably you're in all those things are better as a result of this. Like, just how do you hold those things?
Well, this is where
I feel like people want it to be either or.
Right.
It's either
both.
tragedy and grief, and it's terrible, and cancer's from the devil, or cancer's a blessing, and you're like, I don't know. It's maybe it's kind of both. It seems like
it is kind of both. I think this is where I struggle with anybody that doesn't have faith, because I'm a big picture girl, and so it's like, okay, I have seen what God's been able to do with me through this experience, and I don't want to be the person I was before. I want the ease of what I had before, but I don't want to be the person I had before. And so, that's why when you see people who are quadriplegics or something and they say, I wouldn't want to walk if I could, and you're thinking, what?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
But if you knew that the version of yourself that could walk didn't know God, or didn't have joy or peace or a true understanding of what life has to offer, or, would you? And that's kind of the tension that you're speaking of. I think for me, it's like, I do get both. I have suffered. I will continue to suffer. I do miss the ease of who I was before this tragedy happened, but I will get to be that person again when I go to heaven. So it's not like the story's over. I'm only in the middle.
Yeah.
And so it's like, am I willing to give up the rough, the tough middle? No, because I know what's waiting. I am going to be fully restored, fully healed, fully at peace. I get to have it all. I just don't get to have it all right now.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's why that tension can exist. And I can say cancer was a gift, because I know I don't have to have cancer or its side effects forever. There will be a moment where I don't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah, theologically, I'm, and I've talked about this before, but I'm in this place where we have such a strong desire to label things. This is like, clearly this is good, or this is evil, this is blessing, or this is tragedy. And the place I'm in right now is, I guess I don't know. It's like, there are elements of blessing and tragedy and goodness and evil in the things that we encounter in life, but the ultimate end result, like I don't get to know. That's in God's hands.
Right.
And God has surprised me over and over and over again, how He's used things that I would have never have chosen, never would have asked to go through. How He's used those to be some of the most formative, and not just formative, like I got through something hard, but they've actually they've made me
better,
a person that I am so much more grateful to be, and the world is probably grateful that I am. But it's some of the worst stuff, and likewise some of the things that just seem like, oh, what a blessing, what a great life. Like, I mean, that those things sometimes they can be poison. We've been kicking around. I don't know if it'll make it. We do an annual planning meeting for messages here, and we kick around ideas. And I don't think this one made the calendar this year. I'm going to keep advocating for it. But it's really like, how can abundance be a curse? And I think we need to talk about that more.
Oh gosh, it could be such a curse.
Yeah.
I met somebody the other day that has so much material wealth, and I just left the conversation feeling so sorry for them.
Yeah.
it can absolutely be a curse.
Right, and Jesus had that moment. He meets this rich young man, and this young man's trying to find what Jesus has. And Jesus gives him some advice, and he can't bring himself to do it. And Jesus, like, he goes away sad, and Jesus is sad for him to be like, you could have so much more than the stuff in your life. And so I think in terms of material abundance, but I also think
there's also I want to flip it, because this is the part that I see a lot in Christian circles that I think is a mistake. And I don't know that I always felt this way, but I do now. Is that sometimes Christians think that that they can't learn or grow, or that God can't use non-Christians in their lives. And I have seen that so many times where God will take somebody that, maybe we're not on the same plane faith-wise, and he will use them for his glory, and he will insert them into my life for a specific purpose, and they grow me and they make me a better version of myself. And I think, like, for example, we have, so hospitals refer to our nonprofit, but we also will have churches, because there's people in their congregations who get breast cancer. So they'll refer people to Faith Through Fire. But we had one church that didn't want to refer to us because we did not say that you had to be a Christian in order to mentor. And so they were like, we don't feel comfortable directing people to your mentorship program if it's not a Christian that's mentoring them. And I'm like, I thought that was a miss, because I said, what if the patient is a Christian and they could influence that mentor for God? Or, you're negating all the positive things that person could impart on that individual, which I have seen time and time again. They may not have the faith component there, but they have changed this person's life for the better. And so I think that there's a danger too, just of thinking that God can't use people who aren't in the same place as you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that really kind of speaks to what you're saying, or if I took it to a different place, but it
neglects a lot of biblical history. I mean,
that's what I said.
You don't know your Bible very well if you think God can only use the faithful to.
Well, I said respectfully, I said Jesus was known for hanging out with those that, the ones that needed him, not, didn't sit there and say, okay, we're over here and you're over there. And so I was really fundamentally disappointed with that. But, I do see that play out, and I think that's a mistake as well.
Yeah,
so
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on the abundance thing, I think about this with parenting more than anything else. I've said this lots of times before, but I would catch myself as a young parent of young kids, praying for their protection, all the time. Lord, protect my kid. Oh, Lord,
like
protect them, protect them. Yeah, and protect them from the mean kids at school, and protect them from getting their spirit crushed, and protect them from, physical safety. And I started to do the math on that and going, if God said yes to every time I was praying protection over my kids, my desire would be they'd be wrapped in bubble wrap, and they would never have any physical hurts or any emotional hurts. And I'm like, they would be people without character. They would grow into weak, characterless people. They would have a great, trouble-free life.
Right.
But they would be the most boring people. They wouldn't be very useful people. They probably wouldn't be very deep people. They wouldn't be very faith-filled people. And so I started, and I advise people to do this because I don't think as a parent, it's just normal to pray protection. But I say every time you pray a prayer of protection, pray a prayer of formation also. And so, Lord, protect I got a daughter right now who's traveling in Europe with some friends, and so it's just, she got on an airplane and was meeting him over there. And I'm like, okay, Lord, look after her and, protect her. And then I'm also like, and if she's going to have hard experiences while she's on this trip, don't crush her, but form her. Use this for good. Use this to form her character. Use this for the sake of her growth, her trust in you, for her future purpose in the world. And so I think that's kind of what I mean by the maybe the abundance thing is the wrong word, but that so often we can dream these lives for ourselves that are these trouble-free lives, and we think that's the enviable life.
Right.
Most of us wouldn't drop a pin in our storyline to say, oh, this is going to be this is where my cancer journey starts. Right. This is where it's entering. We wouldn't choose that for ourselves.
That's where that unfettered trust has to come in. I actually struggle on the flip side of the purpose around prayer because I'm like, God knows what's best.
Yeah.
Why am I praying about this when I know his plan's better than my plan?
Yeah.
And it may not be, I have already learned the hard way, right? That what he wants for me is not necessarily what I want for me. And,
Yep.
So I always struggle with the purpose of prayer because I'm thinking he's got this. Like he knows the best route, I've always struggled with that.
I think for me, right now in prayer has had lots of different roles in my life, like prayer being constant, but the purpose behind it or the reason or what it gives me is changed. And right now at this point in my life, what a lot of prayer is it's unburdening the anxieties that I have, reminding my own self that like, oh, God's got this. So it's an unburdening process. And more and more, I'm kind of getting into the contemplative spirituality, which so much of my prayer life is just actually almost like more in a meditative way, experiencing the presence of God and trying to just rest and abide. So it's becoming less verbal. It's becoming less,
that's where I'm at. I mean, sometimes I feel I'm sitting there going, Lord, like there's not a lot going on up here. It's scaring me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I just want to rest in his presence.
Yeah.
And that's all I feel like doing is just sitting. I visualize it. I visualize him meeting me on some mountaintop and us sitting in a grassy field. And it's like, and we're just together. And that's what feels good to me. But that's changed over time. I used to just, repetitively kind of ruminate these specific things that I would want, to talk to him about. And now I don't know if that comes from the trust, but it's more just about, like you said, just sitting in his presence and not necessarily, with my checklist of prayers.
Yeah.
Which feels really strange.
And I think it's what's so powerful about prayer is that I think all of those uses can be helpful. It's this one practice, but it looks different and the application is different and it serves us in different ways over the course of our life. But I do think, Jesus warns us in Matthew 6 about the prayers of many words and trying to wear God out with our many words. And he says, that's how the unbelievers, the pagan people pray, that they're doing their rain dances and they're trying to compel the gods to hear them. And he's like, that's not what you need. Go in your inner room, close the door, pray to your Father who's in secret. And so he warns us about those ruminating things, the showy things, that sometimes those ruminating things, we can keep ourselves worked up. Yeah.
I don't find it helpful. I also find it really helpful when I don't have the words is to just ask the Holy Spirit to intervene on my behalf, you know?
And Paul says that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
we don't know what to pray for, but the Spirit
you're up to bat. I don't even know at this point what I need. I just know my spirit's disturbed. I need you. I don't know. Can you please intercede for me?
Yeah.
And that brings me peace too. It's like, okay, you don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah. I mean, my theme verse for me for the last few years has been John 15, it's a verse I've known forever. But when Jesus talks about, I'm the vine, you're the branches, remain in me, and you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing.
Right.
And just that picture of like, what is a vine doing? It's connected and
which is what scares me when we're dealing with patients in our program. It always scares me when people are trying to lean on their own understanding or their own sense of control for cancer instead of God. Because that is that whole, you can do nothing apart from me. It's like, oh man, this is such a hard circumstance. Yeah. I hate that you're trying to navigate this on your own and that he's not a part of your story,
Yeah. And I think I can understand why if you didn't believe in God before your cancer diagnosis, I can understand why that would feel like another knock against or another further evidence that there must be no God, or if there's a God, he's a meanie.
I just think there's such an apathy toward him, which I think is really interesting. I thought that when I named, interesting story, when I named Faith Through Fire, I did it because, first of all, God was so instrumental in my own story that I wanted to bring glory to him. But I also wanted the first thing a woman saw to be empowering, faith through the fire. Like I wanted them to see our logo and just be like, okay, it's empowering, not sad. But my brother-in-law, when I first started the nonprofit, drafted up a logo to go with it. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but it's like a cross and it's got a flame behind it. And actually, I forget what denomination it kind of looks like. It wasn't intentional. But anyway, Oh my gosh, I got so much flack from anybody I met with, because in the early moments of Faith Through Fire, I was meeting with anybody and everybody that had anything to do with nonprofit work to just learn from them and kind of get their sense. And the one thing I heard over and over again was, take that cross out of your logo. You'll never make any money. It'll just, funders won't fund you. These big corporations won't get behind you. It's going to be a nightmare. Over and over again. Well, they shouldn't have told me that, because immediately I felt like they wanted me to sell my soul, right? For money.
Yeah.
I was like, well, now I'm doubling down. You know, I'm like, if you would have just said, I don't like the logo, I would have been like, okay, I'll change the logo. But now you have literally equated God with material wealth, you know, denying him with wealth. And I said, I can't do it. And so I kept it. And so we still have it today. And what's really interesting, there's a couple things that are really interesting about that. One, I thought that the only people that would be drawn to us are devout Christians. Not true. I'd say 85% of the women that come to us are apathetic when it comes to faith, which I'm always like, Lord, you've got me in this mission field I didn't expect. Like, I don't know what to do with this, because we're trying to walk with them and guide them, but we're also not there to, like, you know, proselytize and hound them into Christianity. So what does that look like, you know? And so
are they coming just because this is a unique thing and they just know they need support?
Yeah.
Is there an openness to
I think,
faith
well,
when they're coming
so
to?
that's the other thing. And I think this is what God does when you honor him, right? So I said, okay, I'm keeping the logo. And it has been the most beautiful gatekeeper to keep out toxic people, because everybody that comes to us isn't necessarily faith-filled or devoutly Christian, but they're open.
Okay.
They're not condemning of the fact that we stand on a Christian belief system. You know, we're very open. This is our foundation for everything we do. But really what we're trying to do is show the love of Jesus in everything that we do. That's it, right? And so we have this beautiful culture at Faith Through Fire. Not everybody's a believer, but everybody assumes positive intent. Everybody is open to the idea that there's, you know, that there's God, or that there's something more. There's people of other faiths or no faiths. We have somebody that was, you know, a devout atheist that loves our program. So, but I think that the cross has brought in people who are open and not, you know, hardened and toxic and negative, which exists a lot in nonprofit spaces. I see other breast cancer nonprofits that have really toxic cultures. And I'm grateful now that I kept that cross, because it has acted as a perfect screen for the kind of people that we want to have in our community. Yeah.
That's a neat story. Yeah. Being around nonprofits a lot. I can imagine that's true. Well, this has been so good. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to say about Faith Under Fire? Faith Through Fire. Faith Through Fire.
Yeah.
Faith Through Fire.
No. We're available.
Your podcast is
Besties with Breasties. Yeah.
Okay.
We did not name that podcast that. We let our survivors name it, and that is the name they came up with. So, yeah, Besties with Breasties, and faiththroughfire.org is our website. So I hope that you don't need us, but if you or, you know, if anybody has gotten diagnosed, they can certainly come find us, and we're happy to walk with them.
Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks for what you're doing to help other people.
Yeah. Thanks for
having me. And thanks just for the perspective that you gave today on lots of things. I've not been touched directly by cancer. No one in my immediate family has. But what the perspective that you shared today is powerful, just for living a life in a broken world and being broken people and trying to find our way through purpose. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, for those of you who are still with us, if this is great content that you could share with someone else, please share it. Don't be shy. Share it with somebody in your life. And if you want to find more content, go to our website, ippodcast.org. We also have a free assessment for you. If you want to measure where you are on this whole life journey and maybe get some pointers about where you could start taking next steps, that's there for you too. Until the next time, God bless you.